Hey everyone, Matt with Triple Act Adventures. This week I have a video that a lot of you have actually asked me some questions on in previous Instagram posts and YouTube videos, and I thought this was a perfect time because I happen to have this device currently out of my vehicle trying to diagnose a rattle in the back of it. So without further ado, today we're going to talk about, so you've bought a 12 volt portable refrigerator, how do you power it? What are the different methods of powering it in your vehicle? And maybe what are some of the brief pros and cons of those different methods. So let's get right into this, guys, with the magic of video here. We have a fridge. So this in front of me is my Iceco VL60 fridge. This is a pretty large fridge. If you can't tell, I'm peeking over this. This is a 60-liter fridge, dual zone. This video will be entailing any fridge out there though, any 12 volt fridge. Now a lot of these 12 volt fridges also have a 110 outlet as well, and we'll discuss that today as well. So you guys probably bought a fridge because, like a lot of us that go camping, overlanding, even just going to a campsite, grabbing a cooler and picking up ice on a regular basis has its pros and cons. That could be a whole different video, but a lot of us pick up these refrigerators because it's a really great solution to have the perfect temperature on beverages and food for those, especially those longer trips. And also some people even bring these down to the beach. Now I'm not a beach guy myself, but a lot of people will also bring a small portable fridge down to the beach and want to be able to power it. We'll also cover that here as well today too. So before we get into the 12 volt section, I wanted to go over one of the ways you can do this. One of the ways that you can power it is through an AC 110 outlet. Almost all the fridges on the market will offer both 12 volt and 110 on them, on a side of the fridge or the back of the fridge, or maybe even the front, depending on what fridge you have. All of them are a little different. You'll have a outlet which you'd be able to plug in a cord. We'll do this just for demonstration purposes. And you can either plug it into a wall outlet, or I have a little battery power bank here, which we'll also talk more about. And that will turn on your fridge. As you can see, and probably down here, you will see that it is now powered up and the fridge is now running. You're probably going to hear that powering up in the background with the fan, so I will probably turn that off so it's not making a bunch of noise. Bear with me. There we go. That way you don't have a bunch of feedback. But, so that's probably the first way that you can power up your fridge is through a 110 outlet. Now, that would be more at like a home scenario, or maybe you had an extension cord somewhere. I wanted to get that out of the way though, because that is a solution, but that really isn't the way that these are designed to be used. Mostly what that 110 outlet was designed for is that, say you were going to be bringing this on a trip, you could actually plug it in at your house and pre-chill it so that you're not using a bunch of power from your vehicle. So you bring it down to temperature, get you all your food or whatever you want to do in there, and then you transport it to your vehicle with the handles and then plug it into your vehicle in whatever format you wanted. So let's talk about those different solutions. Now you guys will have to forgive me. I do not have the cigarette lighter plug that comes with the fridge. It is actually permanently mounted in my vehicle, so I wasn't able to do a demonstration on a cigarette outlet, so you'll just have to bear with me. Let's talk about that though. So the first way that you'd be able to power these fridges of any sort is through the cigarette lighter. Now, one thing I really want to note on this, most modern vehicles will have either one or both of these options. They'll have a cigarette outlet that is only powered with the ignition on, or a cigarette lighter that is powered all the time. As you can probably allude to, you really don't want to power a fridge off of one that's only powered when the ignition on, and the reason why there is that as soon as you turn off your car, your fridge dies. I have heard people that have made that mistake. I think that's a huge oversight on their part, but I have heard of people doing that. They plug in the fridge, turn off the car, walk away, don't think about the fact that the outlet, maybe that was already pre-installed in the back of the vehicle, is on ignition only. So make sure you test that. A lot of times, especially more modern vehicles, it'll actually have a little symbol somewhere on maybe a cover or a plug that goes in there that tells you whether it is on the battery or at ignition only. So keep that in mind. Now, you may be asking, won't this drain the battery of my vehicle? And you are correct, it definitely will. Now, almost every fridge I've ever seen on the market has a battery protection mode in it. And if you're going to be using this method, you want to make sure you put your battery protection mode on the highest part, especially if you have a traditional style battery. If you have an AGM battery, you might even be able to get away with moving that down to the middle section. On this fridge specifically, it has a high, medium, and low, and that's what that's demonstrating is how low the battery actually gets drawn down before the fridge turns off. So to elaborate that further, almost every fridge I've ever seen on the market has a battery protection feature, and what that does is it will monitor the voltage coming into the fridge from your battery or your 12-volt outlet, and it will automatically turn the fridge off at a certain voltage. Sometimes it's adjustable, sometimes it's not. Again, it depends on your fridge, but it will automatically shut that off, so that way you don't draw down your car's battery too low and you won't be able to start your car, let alone that's not good for the battery anyway. So that is your first method. A lot of people do that, and you can kind of get away with it, especially if you're going to be driving on a daily basis. You know, while you're driving, you're going to be pulling enough power, you know, your alternator is going to offset the power being drawn by this, so not a big issue. When you turn off your vehicle, depending if your battery's in good condition and the size of your battery, you can run this off of a cigarette lighter and be able to power it for a decent amount of time. Now, it's not going to be great, guys. You're really not going to get a lot of runtime, especially on a 60-liter fridge like this. If you were going to be running off a cigarette lighter, I would highly recommend you have a tiny little 12-volt fridge, maybe like for like a couple sandwiches and a couple drinks, something very small that doesn't use a lot of power. We'll talk about power kind of at the end. It comes down to math at the end of the day, but we'll talk about that at the end of the video. So the next method would be via a portable battery station, which you guys actually saw me use on the 110 side. Now imagine that you were going to do that on the cigarette lighter side. So you would have, again, I'm sorry I don't have the cord, but you would plug in your cord to your side of your fridge and you would plug it into a portable battery station. Now this is probably the go-to method for most people because it is the most versatile, it's not permanent, and it still allows you to power your fridge for a decent amount of time. I will tell you, this is an older Bluetti. It's an EB70, so it's an older unit, and it's only 716 watt hours. We actually originally bought this unit to power this fridge because we didn't really want a permanent setup. When we first started getting into car camping, you want to call it, or overlanding, we wanted the fridge, but we weren't going to leave it in the truck at all times. So we also didn't want a permanent battery solution, which we'll get to. We went with the portable battery solution. Now, this is super popular because these units have gotten pretty reliable over the years. This is just a unit we picked up at the time. There's hundreds of them out there, and they allow you to plug in a lot of different electrical, whether it's 110 or 12 volt, including like your phone, maybe you're powering a drone battery, something like that. Maybe you're in a tent and you want to be able to power your CPAP machine. There's a lot of use cases for these, including, like I mentioned before, if you're at a beach, you can bring one of these out there with you and power your fridge completely. Like you guys see here, nothing's attached to a wall anywhere. You can power it completely remotely. So you could actually have your fridge out at the beach with cold beverages and food and power it with one of these units. Now, the other thing that people really like these portable battery banks for is a lot of people, I'd say there's another term for them. It's called a SoGen, or a solar generator. A lot of these units have a solar input. So you can buy accessory solar panels that plug in, I think that plugs up here, right here, and actually power this. So for this unit, I got it with a 200 watt fold-up solar panel, and you can recharge this unit from the sun. So case scenario, say you're out in an area with sun, the beach is a great case scenario, plug your solar into this, you've got solar coming into the battery, and the battery's powering this. In theory, you have an almost unlimited life cycle. We'll get to battery usage and stuff like that at the end of the video though. Now, those are super popular, but what you're probably asking though is, if I'm gonna be powering off the portable battery station, how do I charge this station in my car? Great question. There's a couple different ways to do this, and this can kinda has levels of intensity or levels of permanent install, I guess you wanna say. So probably the most common thing that people will do is these also come with a cigarette lighter adapter. You would plug the cigarette lighter adapter into this input on your portable battery bank, into the cigarette lighter in your vehicle, and that will charge this while you're driving, and then this powers the fridge when you're not driving, if that makes sense. It's kind of this revolving cycle. In our case, now again, this is just this fridge, this 60-liter fridge running one side fridge, one side freezer, this little portable battery bank, pretty much it would barely get you through a night of sleep. Again, this is a small portable generator, and they've got a battery pack, I should say, and there are a lot bigger units, and the technology has gotten even better too. This thing is, I think this is discontinued. It's been around for a while, but that would be a method. Now, the reason that that becomes kind of a problem is your typical cigarette lighter in your vehicle doesn't have a lot of amperage and or wattage to actually, it's actually amperage, but not enough amperage to really get enough power into one of these units. One of the ways that you guys can get around that is I've seen people online will buy a little tiny inverter, and the other way they'll do it is they'll plug a little tiny, like, 300 watt inverter from, like, say Best Tech or something like that. I'll put a link in the description for you guys. You could buy a little Best Tech inverter. The inverter plugs into your outlet, your cigarette outlet, and then your 110 plugs into this. So instead of going 12 volt, you're taking your 12 volt from your car. And the reason that's really popular is that those little Best Tech units will actually charge at a 300 watts, which will charge this battery bank even faster. Now, to kind of finish that up though, there is now a lot, I know some of the larger higher end, like the Delta Flow, some of the higher end solar battery packs that are out there, they have now created, a lot of the different brands actually have created actual like charge units that will connect straight to your alternator and give you a full charge, which is really cool. But you're starting to go into like permanent territory. So it's like you're kind of installing half the thing permanent just to charge this unit that's portable. I could see use cases where that's pretty useful for some people. In my mind though, when you start getting into running wires up to underneath the hood and doing a permanent install, you're so close to just doing a full permanent secondary battery system in your vehicle. And that brings up the last method. Don't forget to stick around to the end. We'll talk about battery usage and how you should go about calculating that, and it's kind of gets a little complicated. But the last one here, guys, is a permanent installation in your vehicle. So there are a lot of ways to do this, and this can get really detailed. I can make an entire video on just doing like secondary battery systems. If you guys would like that, please shoot some comments below. I will absolutely make that video if you guys ask for it. So to do that, you're either going to be doing a secondary battery system underneath the hood. That would typically probably be an AGM battery, or you'd be doing a secondary battery system maybe in the back of your vehicle, behind your seats, if it's a pickup truck in the back, something along those lines. That would be what they would call like a house battery, a secondary battery system, and those would typically be a lithium setup, which would be very similar to this. There's a whole thing on lithium versus AGM. I could go into a lot of details on that. Throw some comments below if you want that as well. But that would be another solution. Those systems get very expensive because you're now looking at isolating the batteries, charge controllers, BC to DC controllers, running wiring, making sure you have fuses, all that stuff. But the pros to those systems is your runtime on the fridge is a lot greater. In my case scenario, which if you guys have watched my videos on my build of my vehicle, I think I actually did a video on my electrical system. If I did, I'll put a link to the top right of my electrical system. If I didn't do that video, I will definitely do a link to my build, which does go over my electrical system. I have a 205 amp hour lithium ion battery system in the back of my vehicle, and that system allows me to power a lot of things in my vehicle, including this fridge, for about 3 to 4 days straight with no charging. So as you guys can see, depending on the size of the fridge you have and the amount of power that you're going to be needing, and sometimes even the climate you're in, so if you're in the Arizona desert, you're probably going to have a little bit harder time keeping the fridge at temperature, especially if you're running a fridge freezer, than you would if you were, up in the Northeast in the winter. The fridge barely ever turns on. It just pretty much stays cold the whole time. Oh, at that point, it's pretty much just a glorified cooler. But as you guys can see, the more power you need, the more capacity you're going to need in your battery pack. Now, that leads us kind of to the last part here, kind of the bonus section. Now, the most common question every YouTuber or anybody that ever gets about having a fridge and different battery packs is, how long can I run this fridge on this battery pack? Here's what I'm going to tell you guys. There actually is no exact way to do that except for buying every single battery pack out on the market and running your exact fridge in the exact same case scenario: heat, temperature, food that's in the fridge. Is it full? Is it not? There's so many variables there, but you can get in the ballpark. So what I recommend doing is, on your refrigerator specs, it will tell you what the amperage draw is. A lot of fridges on the market will also give you an average of that amperage over time. That's super useful. Now, the one thing I want you guys to keep in mind though is that just like your fridge at home, it doesn't run 24/7. So say if it gives you a max amperage, that would be at the compressor running at full max, and that is not going to be a sustained load for a long time. And this is why it gets complicated. Really what you want to do is take the amount of power that this fridge puts out. There's conversion charts online, and that will kind of give you an estimate of how much battery capacity it's going to use over a set amount of time. Like I said, there's so many variables, it's really hard to narrow that down. What I would recommend doing is get at least 1,000 watt. I think that this one was a 716 watt hour. Battery in my vehicle is amp hours. There's a bunch of different ways to measure battery capacity, guys. Everybody seems to do it a little different, which is really annoying. And there are conversion charts online to do that. But my recommendation would be get at least 1,000 watt hour power supply. The more the better, but obviously you have to keep in mind how much space you have in your vehicle. This 716 was pretty decent, but like I said, it only really got you through the night. Good news for us is we don't typically stay in one spot for more than really a night. Every once in a while we'll go on like a camping trip or something, which is why we went with a more permanent setup. Our lifestyle and our camping / overlanding style is typically a lot of exploration, a lot of vehicle exploration, maybe hiking, stuff like that along the way, sightseeing, but we then stop, camp for the night at either a remote location, maybe every once in a while we're at a campsite. I know, the blasphemy. And then we move on the next day though. So we're very active going people, and our 205 amp hour battery system charges in like 2 hours from dead. So it's like literally, I have never ever killed that battery in my entire existence. Something like this though, you would be having to charge that on a pretty regular basis. So you either would have to, if you're charging this battery pack out of a cigarette lighter, I think it's 8 hours to charge this. So if you killed this overnight, you would have to do 8 hours of driving to recharge this. And that's just due to the amount of input that's coming in. Like I mentioned earlier, you can do a small little inverter on your vehicle. Make sure you don't run that inverter. If the battery, don't do that on an all-time powered cigarette outlet. Make sure it's ignition only, because that inverter will kill the battery on your car trying to charge this, because it pulls a lot of power. So you could do one of those. That will charge this probably in about this specific unit, maybe like 3 hours-ish. So instead of 8, you're down quite a bit, maybe 3-4 hours. Which would be a lot better, especially if you're an overlander. But hopefully, guys, this broke down all the solutions. I try not to get too into the weeds here, because there are a lot of intricacies on different installs based on your vehicle. But I'm interested to see what you guys have to say, and what do you use, or what are you planning on using? I will tell you that I went through the natural progression. I started out with a Yeti cooler. We did ice and all that stuff for the longest time, and you know, food gets soggy and you have to drain the ice and constantly get new ice. We then moved to a fridge, which is the whole reason of this video. You know, everybody has a fridge these days. And we went with the portable battery station. We quickly found out for our needs, this just wasn't working. And the amount of space that a larger battery station would take up just didn't make sense. If you guys watch my other videos on my battery system, my 205 amp hour lithium ion battery system is about the size of this, minus the charge controller. So maybe a little bit more than twice the size of this would take up, if even. And it's significantly more power. I mean, we're talking substantially more power. So for us, that natural progression going into a permanent system was the best solution for us. But I'm interested to see what you guys have to say. Are you more of a permanent-based person, permanent install type of person, and you know, this is your permanent Overland rig and that's what you do? Or are you kind of like a weekend warrior, you want to be able to pull it all out and throw in a battery pack into the back of the vehicle and just be done with it? Obviously, you got to figure out how to charge these things, but if you have a solar panel, that can maybe kind of work out depending on, you know, where you are in the country. So I'm interested to see what you guys have to say. If you thought this video was great, please do me a favor. Click like, click subscribe, hit that notification bell, drop some comments below, and I'll see you guys next week. Peace.